Salut tout le monde, bienvenue justement à ce prochain panel du Méga 2018. Oui, j'ai hésité sur l'année pendant un instant. Notre prochain panel sera en anglais, je vous avertis, tout simplement. Mais si jamais vous avez des questions, ne vous gênez pas de les poser dans la langue que vous voulez. Mon espagnol n'est pas fantastique, mais on peut quand même s'arranger si vous voulez. Alors, notre sujet de l'heure maintenant, mental health issues. Nous allons parler justement de santé mentale. Alors, allons-y. With me, I have right here Eve, or Ev, same thing, you know? Crevoshay from Take This, and Ben O'Brien from Do a Barrel Roll, and which we won't, but we're gonna talk about it. So, first thing, I'm gonna let you guys present yourself. So, Eve, I'm gonna let you start. So, who are you? What is your implication in mental health and video game industry? And yeah, sure, I'll let you present yourself.
Very good. My name is Eve Crevoshay. I'm the executive director of Take This, which is a mental health nonprofit serving the video game industry and video game enthusiasts. And our motto is, it's okay to not be okay. So we talk about how mental health challenges are normal and they're a part of everyday life. 1 in 4 people, and that's a conservative estimate, will experience some sort of mental health challenge in their life. And so if you don't know anyone or you are not suffering from some sort of mental health challenge, somebody isn't telling you about it. It's a normal part of life. And there are specific challenges and specific opportunities and gifts related to mental health when you're playing or making games. And so Take This speaks to mental health challenges that exist in the context of playing and making games.
And what actually brought you there to talk to have Take This? And
yeah, so I've been working in a nonprofit world for a long time.
Okay.
And my husband is an indie game developer, and so the two passions came together in an opportunity to talk about mental health, which is an important thing and which is part of my family's set of challenges, and which is part of how we. And so it's important to me that we speak about mental health and make it a normal part of everyday conversation. Not to be afraid of it, not to feel like it's a stigma or something bad, that mental health challenges are normal.
So when you're talking about mental health challenges, it can be from any range of...
It can be from feeling depression once in a winter to experiencing some sort of major psychiatric long-term challenge like schizophrenia or bipolar. All of those things fall within the term mental health challenges.
I see.
Yeah, and so for some people it can be a lifelong experience of dealing with something, and for some people it can be something that happens once.
Okay, so it's going to be very good to talk about this kind of resources we can have and what we need also, and what kind of distress people often have when it's related to video game. But also with us, and I did not forget you, yeah. Ben O'Brien from Do a Barrel Roll. So I'll let you explain at first. Many people know about it, and they've heard about it, they've seen it. So I'll let you explain what Do a Barrel Roll is, and then I'll let you also present yourself to know where you're from and what brought you to this project.
Yeah, sure. It makes me happy that a lot of people know about us. That's great. So Do a Barrel Roll is a Canadian nonprofit organization. We use gaming of all types, so not just video games, but live action roleplay, D&D, mobile, escape rooms, tabletop, even sort of pub quiz, to drive positive change in the lives of individuals and their communities. And we define positive change fairly broadly, so positive change including feeling accepted, feeling inclusion, feeling belonging, building community, building friendship, even healthy living. Do a Barrel started as sort of a passion project, this idea that I never really resonated with the sort of classic stock photo of that kid in a hoodie in a basement sort of playing games by himself.
That was often the image. And even right now, we can still see movies and we will see it all the time, this image, but it's not the actual reality.
Exactly. If you, it's sort of like searching hacker in Google. You sort of get that classic kid with the hoodie on the computer. It's very similar if you search Google. If you use Google to search gamer, you still get that same stock photo over and over again. And that never resonated with me. It was sort of gaming was always community. It was always something I did with people that I knew. when I was growing up, it was in person, so sitting on the couch playing Star Fox 64, do a barrel roll, or later on it was LAN parties with friends all around the table, or as far as our LAN cables, Ethernet cables could stretch in a given room, to where we are today with online play, and everything from building guilds to playing with random people you don't know from around the world. So gaming was always community to me, and so that idea that gaming was very isolationist never really resonated. It was never something I quite understood, and so I wanted to start a project to sort of investigate whether or not that was true for other people, whether it was community for other people. And lo and behold, most gamers, if not pretty much all gamers I've spoken with, see gaming as community, as sort of a way to feel belonging, a way to feel accepted. And so Do a Barrel Roll now, our primary project is what we call the Narrative Project. And our Narrative Project challenges some of the endemic stereotypes we have about gaming. So that idea that gaming is isolationist, that it's sort of the bane or the evil of everything we see in the world, from violence to sexual predation to whatever it is. And instead what we're doing is we're collecting stories written by gamers themselves, or recorded by gamers themselves, talking about how gaming has been a positive influence in their life, something that is, it's a tool for self-healing, a tool for driving change in their own lives in a positive way.
So I like the idea of investigating, especially, and pretty much what you're trying to do is to blow up this whole image that we're giving about gamers and gaming communities.
Absolutely.
And so how do you do this at first? So you're talking about narrative people.
Right.
So people write. Is that it?
Exactly. So it's two parts. It's either audio visual, so a 30-second selfie video that you've hashtagged to us on Twitter or something. But it's longer pieces as well. It's sort of narrative pieces. And as a researcher, stories are always the most powerful tool for me to learn something new. And so we collect those stories because those stories both provide us information about how gamers see gaming, but also they themselves become resources for non-gamers to understand how gaming is being used by gamers to improve their own lives. So it's a combination of different mediums, but for the most part on our website, we're publishing stories. We're collecting audiovisual stories. So we've done a whole bunch at Mega MTL from developers as well, why gaming is important to them, why it matters. And we're seeing a lot of the same themes as we are online.
So my question for you both would be, what are the most topical issues right now you see regarding mental health and video games?
I mean, it's a list.
Of course.
Right. I would start, the news recently has been about mental health inside the industry. Crunch has come back up.
That's a thing that has been there for a long time, but we barely started to talk about it. Consumers are really more aware of the working productions of their games. A bit like before, we just bought claws and people clothes and people could buy claws, so I don't care. But then people really didn't think about what was behind it, and we started thinking about it. And now it's also in cultural products, so it could be movies, but also video games, where people now, how was it made? And crunch is a thing indeed, and there's the Rockstar case, but it has been a thing everywhere, so that's a topical thing.
Crunch has always been a topical thing, and Rockstar is a.
Can you define crunch actually for those who might not be so sure what it is?
Is working very long hours outside of the normal working hours in order to ship or finalize a game. And there's different versions of crunch. There's a short-term crunch of I need a week where I'm going to work 80 hours in order to polish a game and get it out. And then there's the cultural example of Rockstar, cultural crunch or long-term crunch, where people work for a year or more doing 80 or 100-hour weeks, or even 60-hour weeks. This is
It still is, yes, of course.
60-hour weeks is 6 10-hour days, right? That's a lot of time to put in, where it becomes part of the culture, an everyday work culture, and people are expected to put in those hours, as opposed to...
You have to, pretty much.
That this is a condition of your employment, that you work or you show up so much. And that has, there's lots of research that shows that long-term, especially long-term crunch, has really deleterious effects, bad effects on your mental and your physical health, on your relationships, and on the quality of your work. So that when you work too much, you don't produce good work. And you don't want people making games that get worse because they're spending so much time at work. So that has always been a aspect of the culture. In terms of Take This's concerns about what's happening in mental health in the game industry, we are also concerned about work cultures that are exclusionary, that don't include people who don't look like white men.
That's a thing we've been talking often about. Also, some studios being pretty much a boys' club.
Yeah.
And or at least have this kind of culture about it.
Because that culture is bad for a working environment.
Of course.
You know, an exclusion makes marginalized people, makes their mental health worse. But it also bleeds into the types of games and the game experience that people have. So it influences players as well, and enthusiasts. So our concern about exclusionary culture bleeds across the whole industry.
And I could create a link also, because very often when games affect someone's life or identity or way of feeling well, which you cover more in your with your media, I would say that it comes from exclusion at first, because if people create video games with this whole mentality, it's gonna go into the product, and people, that's what they're gonna consume after that, and they're gonna see this image. So I think the idea of identity, of how people feel and seeing themselves into a game, you've most probably have stories like that with Double Roll.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's interesting because the most recent statistics from ESA Canada, Entertainment Software Association Canada, say that we've finally and successfully and very excitingly, we've reached gender parity in terms of gamers in Canada. So it's 50-50, men and women who game. And yet we haven't reached that gender parity in terms of developers, development studios. Like you said, it's sort of still the boys' club, right? So some of the stories that we see, particularly when we're talking about inclusion, tend to gravitate towards games where they are inherently gender neutral. So something like Minecraft. Minecraft is, your character can largely be gender neutral. It's tough to sort of figure out who your pixelated character is in terms of gender. And so we see those stories gravitating more towards those types of games. But we do also have stories that talk about how it is a challenging thing to sort of identify with the characters in the games that you're playing with. So whether it's gender, whether it's LGBTQA, whether it's minority groups, religion, whatever it is, our stories do speak to those challenges that I don't identify with the characters I'm playing, the challenges that I'm facing, the objectives I have to achieve. You know, most speak to how it's inherently masculine, and how, you know, there are exceptions. Tomb Raider is a really great example of how we have a very strong female, strong is not even the right word to describe, but a very proactive female lead. But that's not enough. There's not enough of those around. And so feeling included is inherently feeling yourself as part of that game. Yes, right? And so that's why, you know, we have a very healthy indie culture in Canada, where indie developers are starting to build far more inclusive games, because they want to see themselves in those games. It's a democratic process almost. Someone mentioned that to me yesterday. Sort of game development is democracy. It's sort of our ability to participate and to engage and to build our own future in gaming. And so we need to see that more in sort of the larger studios, but inclusion, and particularly sort of feeling yourself in the game, is an inherent part of all the stories we're seeing. Absolutely.
And one kind of, I'm not going to diagnose people, but what kind of symptoms, what kind of troubles can we see regarding video games? People who need video games, who have issues also in their industry, what kind of problems can people develop or be at risk?
You know, I would turn that around.
Sure.
And say that I always want to start from a place of love and celebrating this community.
Of course.
And one of the things that video games offer is a place, especially through online interaction, a place where people who otherwise may have social anxiety or trouble interacting in person find amazing community online and in through games. Or they play tabletop games and they have a community that is mediated through a game, and so it's easier for them to interact with people and to understand and sometimes develop their own skills around or explore their own identity through games. And I think that's what's so powerful. I mean, that's really what we both are saying. And and so I want to start from that place of celebration. There are lots of other things that we can and we should get to in terms of the challenges and dangers of games, but really there's we start from a place of love and celebration for this community and what it offers people.
I see. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I completely forgot what I was about to say. I had these fantastic questions, and it just flew out of my mind.
Well, I mean, I guess...
Yeah, it came back. You were talking about this AFK room.
Yeah.
That's it. So what is this famous AFK room you were talking about?
So the AFK room we take these rooms at large conventions. At a convention, a lovely convention like Mega here, it's much smaller, it's much quieter, But at big conventions, at PAX, at E3, it's overwhelming. It's really overwhelming to be on the floor. There's so many people. There's a lot of... it's kind of an expectation. You spend a lot of money on a ticket. You want to go and you want to take advantage. You push yourself. You play a lot of things. You talk to a lot of people, and so the space is designed as a quiet, supportive space. Yes, it's staffed by clinicians, people who are counselors and therapists, and also by lay volunteers. Mm-hmm. And you can go and you don't have to talk to anyone, or you can go and you can have a conversation. You can decompress, you can calm down, you can color, you can play a little card game, something that is really easy and simple, and it's always very quiet there. And it's just a place, it's like, it's okay that you're feeling overwhelmed, it's okay. Here's a place you can go deal with that.
And what kind of, not what kind of people, but is it more people who just visit or people who are exhibitors you see more using the AFK room? Both?
Both, yeah. Because it can be stressful to be an exhibitor as well. And you have to be on in a way that you not usually. So we see a wide range of people and it's open to everyone. Yeah.
What I see for you both is your main goal is pretty much to democratize everything regarding mental health and also how video games can be there to help. What do we need to democratize this even more?
I feel like if we can solve this now, then we've made significant strides. So congratulations in advance to everyone. It's a challenging thing figuring out how to democratize mental health in video games, I think the starting place is but figuring out what mental health in video games actually means. We have to demystify the science behind mental health. So we're, in terms of some of the issues we're seeing, we're actually starting to see some positive research come out, delinking, finally, video games and violence. We're starting to see how video games can be used to drive empathy in people. There's some really neat research talking about medical students using AR and VR to build empathy for people who are not themselves, right? Or, we had a panel yesterday for education tools and how video games are becoming positive educational tools for young people. So, with all that said, we need to understand the research. We need to understand what mental health is in terms of gaming. We had, I'm hesitant to bring it up, but we did recently have the WHO ruling that video game addiction is now a classified disorder. And, Eve and I have talked about this a little bit, that it is likely premature because we don't have the science behind it yet. The science is still back and forth behind that, and we need to understand before we label. And I think, going from that, we need to be developing tools that help, self-assessment, but not to the point of misdiagnosis and not to the point of misrepresenting things like self-healing. So referring back to our stories, gaming is often used as a tool for self-healing for the gamers that we see. And so, we don't want to see that become classified as addiction, because it's likely not. So, the first step to democratizing mental health in gaming is understanding what the hell we're talking about. Maybe you have some additional ideas on that.
Yeah, that's wonderfully put.
If I can, I'll let you think about what to say. But for that, I'll just invite also people, if they have any questions regarding our guests here, feel free. Si jamais vous avez des questions à propos de la santé mentale en lien avec les jeux vidéo, sentez-vous libre de lever la main. Ça me fera plaisir d'écouter vos questions ou vos commentaires, vos histoires à partager aussi également. Je vous invite, je vais faire l'appel bientôt. Je vous laisse y réfléchir durant ce temps-là. So, back to you.
Yeah, so what I would say is, at root, democratizing is a great way to talk about it. It's also inclusion. At its root, the more we provide safer, bigger spaces for more people, the more we can use video games to support people's mental health, and the more we can mitigate the challenges that people experience in mental health. We're working with a couple of different industry groups and associations, trying to think about how do we create standards for what it means to be safe online, what it means to be what it means to create standards for interaction that are good for people and that are supportive and not damaging. And how do we, and the more we create spaces that have to invite larger, a bigger tent of people, a larger group of people, the better off we will be in supporting mental health, if that makes sense.
It sure does.
Yeah. And so inclusion, I think is my bottom line.
Ben, if I may ask, you've been receiving lots of stories so far. So how long have you been working with...
It's about 7 months now, so we're pretty brand new, which is great. But the stories are rolling in faster than we can sort of manage, which is fantastic. And so just as an aside, I encourage you all to share your own stories with us, whether over our website or Twitter or whatever it is. Absolutely. Sorry, continue.
Well, my question would be, is there any specific stories that has made a big impact on yourself, or you feel that is worth sharing?
Yeah, they're all, like I said, they're all publicly available on our website, but there have been a few, The one reason we received recently was written by a young girl from the Middle East who talked about how in contexts where gender equality is not necessarily facilitated or encouraged, she used online gaming to build herself a community of female gamers in her own area, and that was sort of, it was a fascinating, almost cheat code towards gender equality in sort of contexts and political environments where that's not necessarily encouraged or facilitated. We've seen stories about how people have met their boyfriends, girlfriends, fiancés, partners, all the way to marriage, and how gaming has been sort of both the bridge that they came to know each other, but also a bridge to help them solve problems together. It sort of becomes this almost neutralizing force where you may be arguing about something stupid like who did the laundry that day, but then you sit down and collaboratively play on a game, and that seems to sort of be pushed down or neutralized just a little bit. We have stories talking about how gaming is many stories talking about how gaming is such an important tool for helping with social anxiety, and particularly at schools. So young kids who are going through high school and never felt included or never felt accepted in their environments use gaming to build new communities. And, you can sort of pretty much go on Reddit almost every day and find a new story about someone who has met a friend online from halfway around the world, and they only met them in person, but that person online was their best friend. It was their community. It was their...
So you often get stories from students, I would say?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. Yeah, particularly students. So our stories are largely right now coming from gamers themselves. Absolutely, the project is open to developers as well, and those are important stories, especially in terms of crunching and sort of the innovation culture we have now. It's open to everyone, but we see most of our stories from younger gamers who are trying to sort of themselves negotiate why gaming is important to them, but also creating a resource for people that they may know themselves to sort of acting as an outlet to describe why gaming is important to them and why that they themselves are gaming. If they can't express it in words, or it's being misunderstood by, say, parents or peers or colleagues or teachers or whatever it is, this is a project and a tool for them to sort of express in their own words why gaming is something that they do on their pastime. Yeah.
That I would echo. We've published some stories in the past about how just individual narratives about games that have helped people understand or deal with their mental health challenges. There was also a wonderful first-person account that was published in The Escapist about just last month, I believe, about a woman who came to understand and be able to identify as transgender through playing games. And by playing games, she was able to take on the role of a female character and suddenly felt at home. And so games are just, they can be extraordinary tools. And it's really cool to see that those stories take off. One of the things we've been doing in terms of building community too, we started this program for streamers. And we've invited about 14 now streaming ambassadors to be part of Take This. And they have agreed to abide by a set of standards for interacting with people online in a supportive and welcoming way to support people who express mental health challenges while they're streaming.
Yeah, because it's a whole different community, whole different world, the streaming community, and culture that has emerged for maybe only 3 or 4 years, pretty much.
It's extraordinary, and it's a place. It's really a major part of the game community at this point.
Yeah, it's a whole big, huge thing now.
Yeah.
And people bond a lot.
They sure do. And we want, as much as we can, to provide safe places and standards for what it means to support, but not provide therapy to someone who's expressing challenges online. And what are the tools that we can provide to streamers and to moderators that create those safe spaces, and then really build true community.
So that's interesting. Those ambassadors, what do they do actually? Is it do they share? Do they work with you to democratize what you're working on?
So yeah, they distribute. They what they do is they have a set of standards around empathy and kindness that they exemplify, and they demonstrate through their chats, through their moderators, and through themselves a supportiveness and a kind of a set of healthy boundaries. Say, this is what I can do. I can provide you with support. I can validate what your experience is, and I can provide you with these resources. And here are some good resources if you really need more help. Here's a way to think about finding a therapist. Here's a way, if you're in crisis, here's a hotline to text or to call, so that people feel like they know where to go if they need help.
Especially for streaming, because sometimes it feels a bit like the Far West, I would say. We often get stories about distress related to live streaming, and Twitch is often affected by it. So
yeah, we're trying to work across all the platforms. Right now, our ambassadors are on Twitch because it's the largest. Yeah. It's the largest, and trying to work with all of the streaming outfits to help them identify standards and supportive structures, both for their streamers and their community. Yeah.
Ben, if I may ask, has there been anything related with live streaming with Do a Battle Roll?
Not quite yet. So because our mandate is focusing on developing community, particularly in sort of the physical form, so we tend to focus, at least initially, on creating community by putting people in the same room. So we have some programming coming up in January we're calling She Games. It's a program to provide venues and spaces for women and girls to try gaming if they haven't before, to build gaming community if they are gamers already, or to connect with those who are around. So environments and spaces where there's no pressure to be playing the shooter game if that's not something you're interested in. There's no pressure to necessarily be good at a game, but simply to try. So our programming focuses primarily on providing those, or it will in January. So if you're keeping touch, please follow us as this develops. But providing those physical spaces. Of course, online gaming and online communities is an unbelievably important and core component of this discussion as well, because online communities are growing at an exponential rate in terms of gaming. We need to be starting to look at and addressing things like toxicity in communities online. Right now, industry is sort of approaching it in almost a haphazard way, where you have Blizzard and Overwatch looking at sort of removing people, or they created a ranking system almost for how toxic a person is. You have Xbox doing the very similar thing, but there's no coordinated effort across industry as to how we can approach toxicity.
But it is a thing that every huge studio has to take into account right now. If I'm looking at Ubisoft, for example, also, I personally play a lot of Rainbow Six Siege, and they're not messing around. A single word you can write in chat will ban you instantly. And I've often been playing a game where suddenly someone is being a bit toxic and poof, he's gone. There you go. But that's something that has to be done. But at the same time, some people are. It's hard to manage, I would say. So, what could be done? What would help to create? I'm not saying please solve toxicity in gaming, but do you think that something could be could help studios, bigger or smaller, to actually create a better norm or something like that? What could be done?
Well, I mean, we're working on that right now.
Oh, really?
And we're working on it with some industry consortia that are trying to figure this out. And the truth is that there's a lot of pieces of it. And what's toxic in one place may not be toxic or may not be applicable in another game environment. It depends. It's very complicated, and there's also there's an interest in how do we, just banning people does not give them the tools to learn and grow.
That's it, because that's the main thing. Being toxic, how do you fix it? You just cannot punish it. There's got to be a learning process somewhere.
And this it's not just inside games that we have to think about that, right? It's also inside in Discord and other chat environments, inside game chat communities, online. Game communities extend beyond beyond the game itself. And so how do we introduce sometimes social consequences into those conversations? How do we moderate them in supportive ways as opposed to just cutting people out? And how do we create norms when people join communities? I mean, there's so many pieces to this. And I honestly, I don't have all the answers yet. I mean, this is not,
of course.
We don't know. And these are just things that we're thinking about right now.
Before we conclude, I'm just going to head back. Si jamais il y a des gens qui ont des questions ou des commentaires à donner ici. Oui, on t'écoute. Je vais redire par la suite dans mon micro parce que... C'est ça. Mais si tu veux parler fort, je t'écoute. Je vais te demander juste si tu peux te rapprocher.
Can't even hear it.
How much you know about the correlation between the toxic working environment and the toxic company? Because we know in some obvious cases like sexism and historical racism, but like more something like compulsive working. Does it result in compulsive gaming in the type? Because it seems to be the case.
I'll let you recap the question.
Yeah, so the question is about, is there a correlation? Do we know much about the correlation between a toxic work environment and how that manifests in gameplay and game communities? There's not research, there's not actual information. I can, and I don't want to cite a specific example and call out a specific situation because we don't know exactly. But it does seem clear that the way that work environments take shape bleeds into the way that games are made, and especially that work environments that are exclusionary and don't include everybody and don't account for the different types of engagement with games change the way the games are made and change the game experience, for sure. And that's why inclusion matters. And that's a drumbeat that that exists. So that's as much as I will say right now. Yeah.
Ben, I don't know if you have anything to add about that.
No, nothing in particular. But I think the only thing I would say is that ultimately, in my perspective, like Eve, I would agree that there's no comprehensive research on that correlation, and it would be hard to measure. I think as a researcher, it'd be very tough to measure. But we do know that inclusion drives innovation and innovative thinking. So, and not just inclusion, but difference as well. So the broader the spectrum you can have of people in a particular workspace, the more different thinking you're going to be encouraging, and that's a comprehensive and a very important first step in towards driving a differential approach in terms of game development, and ultimately, if there is a correlation, towards gameplay.
And I would say not just a first step, a necessary
Absolutely,
step.
yeah.
Je ne sais pas si on a d'autres questions. Any other questions?
Come join us on the couch.
So you were saying that you're working with developers in all these issues. How open they are to this conversation? Is it hard to talk to them about these things, as we talked about the Boys Club and all that? How open they are? Just curious.
I'll just let you recap again to make sure that the people online can hear the question.
So how open are developers to having these conversations about inclusion and culture change? I would say that the game industry is a large industry, and it varies widely. But in general, most developers are very concerned about this. I would say most mid and large size developers are concerned. Indie developers, smaller developers are concerned, but there's the capacity that they have to think about this is limited, because it's a really different question among indie developers, because it's just there's a few people, and it's all hands on deck, and questions about who they're hiring or what the culture is are really hard to answer at that scale. And it's so much about passion and individual investment in things. Yeah.
Anything else?
No, I'll make it really short. Completely agree. The developers and industry representatives that we've worked with have all been very open to sort of exploring these challenges, because they know they are challenges they ultimately will have to explore at some point. And so that's why you see more engagement with nonprofit organizations, charitable organizations like Eve's and mine, where developers are now speaking to us about how they can start challenging these issues themselves. Yeah.
So, Yves Crevoshay from Take This, thank you very much. Ben O'Brien from Do a Barrel, thank you. We can basically find anything about you, your organizations online.
Yep.
So, we'll send, it will be possible to find all the links and listen back to this and everything. So, thank you so much. Have a nice day. Merci
Thank
beaucoup
you.
tout le monde.
Thank you.